This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for Avoid the Maze. And I am so lucky to be able to talk to a variety of different people. And today we're talking to somebody who is a musician, but not, as far as I'm concerned, the ordinary musician, because how many people do you know who play the harp? In fact, when I think of the harp, I think of angels. And so maybe the musicians who play harps are related to the angels. Um, and as I just told my guest, I have a very dear friend who I'm going to be talking to later. She was my first friend in life, and she plays the harp and played the harp in the New Jersey Symphony. So a lot of connections going on. But my guest today is Deborah Henson-Conant, and I love her HipHarp.com. So if you want to know more about her, go there. And if you're listening to this on an audio, you may want to switch over to YouTube because she's got a beautiful harp right behind her. And I feel like the angels are all around you. So, Deborah, take us on your journey. First of all, what made you decide to play this instrument? And is there a place where you go to learn how to play the harp?
Thanks, Karen. Well, this instrument actually came kind of late in my life, and it wasn't a choice. Initially, in the way that you'd say, it's not like I grew up being like, oh, I want to play the harp. And in fact, I must disabuse you in this moment and tell you that I have often been called the bad girl of the harp. So just letting you know, I guess angels come in all different forms. So I grew up in a pretty matriarchal family. And I would say that one of the most important things, and I also want to say that what I do now is I tell stories with music. I create stories with music, and then I perform them myself or train other people to perform my stories and music or empower them to create their own. So stories with music is a really important part of my life. And I grew up with a mother who had left my father very early, and we went and lived with my father's mother. And so I had these two grandmothers that became really important to me. I was living with both of them, and each of them had a different idea about music. But music was really important to them, and they pretty much let me play. Everyone had a piano, they let me play it. But I can trace back to those two grandmothers what's really in my heart. So my grandmother Anna was from the old country, and she was Jewish. Music was about the highest form of art. Music was about self-expression, and it was, you could become a doctor, a lawyer, or a musician. And so that was how she saw it. But grandmother Edith was from Sweden. She was a farmer, and she also played music, and she was a very functional musician. And she said, people have to sing. Someone has to keep them together. That's why you play music. So there was almost this feud between them, one in which it was this high art, and the other in which it was absolute and complete service. So I grew up seeing these two things. And then I grew up seeing my mother and my aunt, who were both opera singers, very powerful women, very powerful voices. And I saw them over and over and over again not getting the jobs because they were taller than the leading man. For some reason that had nothing to do with the incredible transformation that these women would create in a room. And so I just want to describe this to you because that became meaningful to me, that I was going to fight for it. I think all of us get to some point of our life and we're like, I would fight for that in other people.
Yes.
And so I would see my mother being a normal mother, and then she would turn on this thing called Music -1. It was opera without the voice. And she would transform. She would say, okay, this is what it's like now. This is the scene. This is what I'm wearing. This is what's just happened. And she'd turn the music on, and suddenly this world just opened up and was created. It was transformational. I saw a person turn ordinary life into a magical place, a different dimension. And I will say that she came, we were living in the South at one point, and she came to sing at the church that I was going to. My parents were not religious, but I was a kid and everyone else went to church. So I went to
Why
church,
not?
at
Yeah.
the Southern Baptist Church. And one of my friends who I'm still in touch with today, my mother came and sang in that church. And he said, when she sang, she blew the roof off that church. And what happened to me, he said, was that I saw if that level of artistry could come into my life, what does that mean for me? That means that I could also go there. And he ended up becoming an architect and an artist. So I'm saying this to just point out the power of seeing someone's ability to transform a space, and then seeing that that person was not allowed, was not given the opportunity to do that on stage. That was what really shifted me. And you'll think, well, what does that have to do with the harp? It will come around to that. So I started writing stories with music, and was basically, no one will ever tell me whether I can perform or not, because I'm going to make my own shows. I'm going to perform. I am going to write for my aunt so she can get on stage and perform. So I was very moved by that. And I went, but I didn't know how to read music. I can tell you that story in a minute. But I didn't know how to read and write music, but I could create these big stories. And I finally went back to school to learn how to read and write music. And in the closet was a harp. I'd taken a couple lessons on all these different instruments as a kid. And so I became the harpist. And at first I was just like, wow, what? Why am I doing this? This instrument, I don't like harp music. I don't identify with being a harpist. I'm a different kind of person. Why am I doing this? But I got very interested in it. I got interested in how it worked. I got interested in the mechanics of it. I was fascinated. I had a teacher who was brilliant at just saying, okay, you're a composer, fine, let me shunt you there. And she made sure that I was composing as soon as I was playing the harp. What I discovered after years and years and years of struggling with this instrument is, hello, it is the bard's instrument. It is the instrument that allows you to tell stories. And you can read the TED Talk about this, when I worked with a company to shrink it down, strap it on, and plug it in to make this electric harp, I was able to embody the instrument, take it on as a piece of my body, and then I could become the story in the moment immediately. And I began to understand, wow, is that what my brain saw all that time ago, that I have a relationship with this harp that would not only transform me, but would transform the instrument, and that would allow me to tell a story on a dime like that with music. So that's the long form of why the harp. And why the harp? Because it is the nakedest of all instruments. It does not tell you how, we think it sounds a certain way, but it doesn't have to. It can be flamenco fire. It can be, there's so much you can do with it because it is so accessible. It's accessible. It's right there. Everything's there. The strings are there.
That's as you're telling the story, what I love about it is that you didn't go out looking for the harp. You didn't go out looking for a specific instrument, but you knew what you wanted to do. You knew that you wanted to get these stories out, and probably knew deep down inside that music is a universal language. So when we hear music, whether we like it or not, we are drawn to it. My son, a couple of weeks ago, sent me a link. He said, I want you to listen to this. And I clicked on it. And my first reaction was, this is not my music. It was very electronic, wasn't connecting to it. And so I said, why'd you send that to me? He goes, what didn't you like about it? I was like, oh, so you figured this out. And he said, do me a favor. The next time you go to write one of your blogs, turn the music on. Then tell me. I heard the music differently.
Oh.
It brought out something different in my writing.
It was minimalist. I see.
And he said, So think about music this way, Mom. When you played it the first time, you had no real thoughts other than, this isn't my type of music. When you played it when you were sitting down to write, did you know what you were going to write about? And I said, yeah, but that's not what I ended up with. And
Wow.
that transformed you. So I can imagine your stories with the harp are transforming individuals.
As you're talking, I'm thinking the words that came to my mind were catalyst for story and catalyst for what you sat down as one person, and then the music allowed you to become a different character.
Exactly.
And I would say that's what's been fascinating to me ever since I was a child. First of all, the storytelling aspects of music. I didn't play the harp as a kid, but just my first things that I played as a kid were super 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 simple because I wasn't reading music, and it would be like, and there was rain. I don't know if you can hear this. Can you
Yeah.
hear that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. There was rain. And then the little princess, moi, went down into this, dark, dark, dark place. And what did she see there? It was all darkness. And then this monster came and it chased her until finally she was away from it. And then there she was again in the rain. So I realize as I'm telling the story now, I'm like, oh, wow. Even as a kid, I saw it starts somewhere, it goes somewhere, it comes back. So there was that aspect to the music, but anyone could play that story. Now, I might play that story differently now. I might, like, there was once a little girl, and what she did was she loved to play in the rain, and one day she was walking and she fell in a hole, and she went down, down, down. Oh, she went, so it would be
I
like,
love that. Yes.
it would be the same, it's the same story, just with different, a different, an adaptation of that story, which is interesting because I've been thinking a lot about adaptation, because now a lot of people are starting to adapt my music in different situations. And I just
Well,
realized, wow, that is all part of that same going forward. I
so
want to say, yeah, go
go
on.
ahead. No, go ahead.
Well,
Finish.
I wanted to say something because I know that I've listened to some of your other programs and really, really enjoyed them, and know that your listening audience are people who do want to be self-expressed and who are, and this is one of the reasons why in my school, the HipHarp Academy, where I teach harpists, I train them to tell their own stories with music. And I love working with adult people who have, and many of them have either were at the harp and they got demoralized with it, or something happened, they left it. They may have had incredible ability, they left it, and now they're coming back to it. Some people did not even start until after retirement, but and they tend to go through the same journey that I went through in the beginning. Was, well, I better be a good harpist and I better do it right because this is my chance to actually be a real person. Like, that's how I was with it. I can prove I really kind of went to the harp to hide who I was. The wild, chaotic, storyteller person, and be like, no, I can be a real harpist. And my job is to help them understand that the life they just lived is the most beautiful thing for them to share, and that the instrument should be the platform that lets them share that life, that lets them share that story, instead of feeling like you have to fit into this thing. And that's been my journey, that I felt like I needed to fit in, and then finding ways to be like, no, this must become a partner to me, to who I am now and how I am now. And if I only have two fingers, then those two fingers need to be able to help me speak. And I can speak my life, my truth, my story, my fear, my challenges. I can speak those, and the instrument, just like you were saying, when you sat down to write, the music becomes the thing that opens that door.
Yep, absolutely. And the reason I do these podcasts, and we do them under different names, this happens to be under Avoid the Maze, but I do it because for the first 60 years of my life, I really thought I needed to be somebody else. I was always striving, and I wasn't reaching those levels. And it took me being kicked out of corporate America for me to look in the mirror and say, who do you want to be? And I realized I wanted to be me. I didn't have to look like somebody else. I didn't have to do the things that other people were doing. And I chose, I want to get my voice out there, but not only mine, I want yours. I want my neighbor next door who I might be able to learn something from. And so when I started podcasting, I have to admit, the first group of people I started working with thought I was insane. And they said, we'll give you every Tuesday at 2:00, we'll broadcast you. In the first week, I had on a gentleman who had been on the radio for many, many years. And I'm not sure if he retired from it or if he chose to leave, however it happened, but he ended up going to work for the Red Cross. And all of a sudden I saw this different individual. And so I asked him if he'd come on my show. And I started out with, take me on your journey. And he talked about being on the radio and how rewarding that was and everything. And then all of a sudden he just stopped and he said, the most rewarding part of my life is I can do what I really want to do now. And I'm working with the Red Cross. I'm learning the stories of other people. It was just his statement that the internet radio station came to me after that first podcast and said, I guess you had a good idea here. And I said, I'm doing it for me. I need to be who I am. And it has changed me. And I see this in you, that you allowed things to transform you to become the person you really wanted to be. You didn't listen necessarily to mom or grandma or to your teachers. You said, I'm going to do what I need to do.
I think eventually, slowly, yes. Although I can feel so much of all of them in me, and I think you're right that there were times when I felt constrained by that, and the older I get, I'm able to let go of the constraints that came with those people's stories and allow the beauty of it, to allow what I love. The other thing I really love that you just said, and it was, as you were saying it, I was thinking, yes, exactly. I love to hear other people tell my music in different ways. I do what I do because I'm unlocking something. Like when I'm teaching, I'm unlocking, and I get to see somebody bloom, just as I got to see my mother transform. I get to see other people do that. And I heard you say, I want to hear other people's stories. And then you heard a story where someone said, and I want to hear other people's stories. And I saw that beautiful unfolding and unfolding and unfolding that happens when we share.
Yes. And it is so important. You mentioned a TED Talk. I now listen to TED Talks. I listen to The Moth. There's another one that I've been listening to. And it's interesting, in almost everybody's story, you can pick out one little nugget that reflects inside of you. And I never would have believed that in the past. I would have said, oh, if somebody's talking about playing the harp, okay, I'm going to hear their story. But it brought out other things. And as I told you, when I read your bio today, there were these two things that stood out to me. Number one, my best friend from infanthood plays the harp. And strangely enough, we're doing just a Zoom call this afternoon to get caught up with each other. What a coincidence. And then I read about this new piece that you have that has to do with Ukraine. Yeah. And I don't care what anybody's religious beliefs are or political beliefs. Ukraine is just going through a horrible time. And they were previously part of Russia. That's where my grandparents came from. And my grandparents had to escape the area. And so there's like these two things, like this is calling me to talk to Deborah. So tell us about this piece.
Yeah. So this, I just want to go back to one thing you said because it really resonated. Sure. Was that when other people are talking, I think that we often hear some part of our own story that gets resonated, which is so beautiful, and that takes part in this story with Irina Litvinenko. So I write music, and there was a particular piece that I wrote that's called Baroque Flamenco, and it was a piece that I used to really break out of what a harpist is like. And I'll just show you, like, for example, it begins with a completely different kind of playing, which is like this. And it's not probably what you would expect from a harp, right? So because it's about flamenco, and the point of writing it was to break out of what people think of as a harp, and the level of self-expression that or the spectrum of self-expression that I could have with harp music. And I was like, where is the harp music that lets me just like show up as this other person? So I wrote this piece, and it really was the center of my career. And it was one of the pieces that was when I got a Grammy nomination, it was one of those pieces that was part of that album. And so this piece is being played by other harpists around the world. And I get requests for licenses to do it. But one week it was a Tuesday, and I got this email from this woman in Ukraine. And she said, I really want to play your piece. I want to play it on the bandura. The bandura is the national instrument of Ukraine. It represents the people of Ukraine. And I'm going to be playing with a folkloric orchestra, and I'm doing it as an act of resistance and self-expression. Our voices will not be shut off. We will be heard. And she said, and here's the thing, I can't pay for the license fee. And I was like, and the same week I got 3 other exactly the same thing, beautiful, not exactly, they weren't Ukraine, but beautiful requests, all of them absolutely meaningful projects, and they could not pay the fee. And I was just like, there's a gap here. If I don't get paid for what I'm doing, I can't keep doing, I can't keep making more music. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And then there was this one moment when I was like, what if this gap is an opportunity? What if there's another player in this game or in this piece that we haven't heard from yet? What if there is someone who could sponsor that license fee? That means that they would be supporting my work, they would be supporting her work, they would be supporting the orchestra, they would be supporting the audience that comes to see this with doing one thing. And so I put together this thing, and I created this thing called the Legacy Project Bridge. I already had a legacy project of people helping me to get more music of my music into the world, but this was the bridge. And I put it out in my email, and within 5 minutes, I got a letter back from an old friend named Dan Beach, and he said, I want the Ukraine project. And later in the day, I got other people, I want to help. So I was able to help fund most of those projects, but he funded this one. And from there, he said to me, I have been looking for a way to make a difference to an individual person in Ukraine. This is exactly what I'm looking for. So since then, she adapted the piece. She adapted it for her own instrument. She played it in concert. It got broadcast on national television. He then helped to commission. He commissioned another piece from her from a Ukrainian composer. So now he's supporting yet another person there. He helped to support her son's schooling, and now they've just commissioned. He just sponsored another piece, which they just recorded about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And what's been so powerful about this is not just that she's adapting the music, but the field reports. I said, I'm going to connect you with this sponsor, but I really want us to have this connection. I want to know what's happening. I want to know how you're doing this, because this is new. Nobody's ever done this before. And so she sent these field reports, and the last one was it was on the day of the concert. She said, we don't know if we're going to be able to have the concert. There's air raids. There's been shelling the night before. We have no electricity. It's freezing in the rehearsal rooms. We've got a generator to turn on, for the concert. But then the next day she was like, but we did it. We did it. We did the concert. The music was heard. And she said, there were so many flowers on the stage, I could not carry them off. And when she said that, I realized that this concert with this instrument showing this level of self-expression, and this second piece was just this romantic, heartfelt piece. So she's played 2 of my pieces now. I realized that it was not just an artist, hello, look what I can do. It was someone speaking for a people. And her being on stage, being so self-expressed with this music, helps them to feel like, yes, we are still alive. Yes, we are still here. And the bandura represents those people. And this is something the harp has represented. There are cultures in which the instrument is so associated with a certain type of person that the instrument itself has been, the players have been persecuted, the instrument's been burned. There's a big history of that with the harp. There's a history of that with the bandura and with Russia and Ukraine. This opportunity to partner with her in this, which came because the third person, the sponsor, came in and made it possible. That has been incredible. And he just wrote to me the other day and he said, in all my 89 years, this is one of the things that has been most meaningful to me.
I'm getting chills as you're saying this, because so many of us walk around with something that we feel we really need to do. But the first question we'll ask ourselves is, why should anybody listen to me? Who am I? I'm just another pebble in the sand. We're afraid to tell people what we want to do because we don't want people to be negative. And so we sort of keep to ourselves. And then we are sorry as we get older that, what if I had done some of these things? And that's exactly how I changed my life at the age of 60. I said, look, I love to write, even though my father at one point told me, leave the writing to your brothers and me, because they were much better at the time. But I learned to write. I learned how to be expressive. And it was like, sorry, Dad, I know you're in the heavens watching me, but I'm going to start writing. And writing took me to podcasting, and podcasting took me to coaching. And I'm not afraid to tell people what I need. If they don't want to give it to me, they don't want to help, that's okay. If they do, they'll show up.
Can I jump in on something you said? You said they were better than me. And so two of the things that you said were, I wish I'd done that before. And my thought was, oh, I'm so glad you're doing it now. It's one of the reasons I love working with people who have had lives. So they're talking about something they've experienced. And this idea that we have to be good at something in order to have the right to express it. I think this is what leads to a lack of richness. I mean, because I have the honor to get to see people who are just learning how to play the harp or just learning how to apply it in certain ways, as well as people who have great skills, but learning how to not just do a thing, but tell their story with it. And that's what I heard Irina doing. She told her story with my music. She brought it out and told her story and the story of a people with it. And there's a project now happening in Germany where they're taking my music and they're adapting it to tell a whole children's concert. But going back to this thing of just like, I would say, I would fight for your right that it has nothing to do with how good you are at it, but that you have the passion, that you have the desire, that you have the willingness to tell that story.
Well, and when I was younger, I didn't. And I have to admit, and I think my father saw that so my father started out writing poetry, and my brother sort of picked up on that. And yet when I would write what I thought was poetry, everything had to rhyme and it became nonsensical. I mean, I've gone back and looked at some stuff, and where was my 10-year-old brain at the time? But I appreciate to some degree that my father told me to leave it to them. Because when I finally chose this is what I wanted to do, it was almost my declaration, looking up at the heavens saying, sorry, buddy, I'm going to do this now. And almost every day when I write a blog, as I sit here and I look out my studio window, I look up at the sky, and it's almost like, I'm challenging my dad that I can do this. But if I think of, I would have tried it earlier in life, I wasn't there. And that's what I think you're saying about many of the individuals that you're working with who already have these experiences. Okay, my experience was I didn't think I was good enough. I didn't think I had anything to say. So I didn't do it. But I woke up one morning and now I have something to say. And whether you're doing it with your music, someone else's music, or just with the music in your head, your stories are important, because if we don't know what other people are going through, how can we be aware and mindful and considerate? I think our biggest problem is when we don't know something, we make it up in our mind, and it either creates a love or a hate. There's nothing in between. And we need to find that in between.
It's interesting. One of the things that I say to my students, and something that I work with myself on, when I'm first of all, I love that image of you with your father, and I somehow think that you're saying, "Hey, you screw." You're probably
Yeah,
not saying. Okay,
I
that's
am.
kind of what I thought you were saying, and that's really beautiful because it is a surgence of yourself, a surge of yourself. One of the things, so in my academy, there are about 150 students, and it's all group teaching, and people are sharing things, and so they're very nervous about sharing around other harpists. And so there's a sort of a thing I do before they share, which is to say, look, our heads are stuffed with all this stuff. I have to be good. I have to be all this stuff. This is stuffed into our heads and we're held onto it. And this is better than that. And that was better before and blah, blah, blah. And we need to let go of that. Let's drop that out and watch each other and witness each other. And if you're having trouble, if that stuff is coming into your head, then find something to love. It can be something to love in yourself. It can be something to love in what you're seeing, but be there in love. Because I notice that if I find something to love, even if I'm running and my legs are hurting and stuff, and I find something to love, everything shifts and it opens up. And then the last thing I say to them is whenever someone shares, and you just kind of said this, whenever someone shares, there is a gift in that for you. And your job is to find that gift and share it with them because they don't know it's there. Share it with them and tell them what that gift was. And then they're more likely to share, and you have this gift.
I love that. So this piece that we've been talking about, can the public hear it? Is it
They
out
can
there?
they can read about it now. They will be able to hear about it. They will be able to hear it in the I think it's gonna they're editing it right now, and it will come out in I think February. It's going to be on the national television there. But people can read about it now. They can go to my blog, and they can sign up for my mailing list, because
Okay.
then you'll be getting the stories, in real time as they come out. And my website is HipHarp.com. That's hip as in cool, harp as in the instrument.com. And you can just go there and you can just poke around. You can see more about the projects. You can see on the page. So you said being ourselves. I just want to say that when I was a kid, I wanted to be Leonard Bernstein. What I wanted to be about Leonard Bernstein is I wanted to be telling stories with music. I wanted to be on stage, be performing, and I wanted to be educating. Those were the three things that I saw him do. And so you'll actually see those on my website. You'll see and you can also look for the Legacy Project. You just look for the word legacy, and you'll be able to see that project and how that's working.
I love this. And one thing I have to say about musicians, and I'm going to really say indie musicians, because when you're part of the conglomerate, you may not come across as caring, as nice. But my brother was in the music production business, and he passed away in September. Thousands of people who he had worked with have come out of the woodwork. And my brother was the type of person that he wanted to help make you better. He knew that he himself couldn't do that, but his energy. And I've heard that from so many people, that your brother's energy got me to play a different instrument, go in a different genre, choose to take a step back. And a couple times I would say, he encouraged you to take a step back, and was like, yeah, because I was burning myself out. He saw it. And that's the one thing that I see amongst musicians, is that you care about each other. And if we could take that personality and bring it into our everyday world, life would be so much nicer. And maybe Ukraine wouldn't be fighting for their life at this moment in time.
Yeah. Karen, you're making me think of this song that I have that's called You Have a Voice. And I wonder if I can just sing a little bit of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's I think this is something that would be meaningful to your audience from what I've heard. So by the way, with these little levers, I'm putting it in tune.
Okay.
You have a voice that's yours alone. This is the tie that binds you deep in the dark of evermore. That's how your soul can find you. So raise your voice, for in the end it's all you have to bring. And this is the sound that turns lost into found when you sing. You have a voice that tells a tale nobody else can tell it as well. This is the tale, the song, the story of you. So raise your voice, for no one else can give the gift you bring. lost into found. You are the sound that turns lost into found when you sing. And when I say sing, I mean the way that you sing. If you sing telling a story, if you sing writing a book, if you sing with your feet, if you sing with your anything that is your voice.
That is beautiful. That is beautiful.
Thank you. Well, that is what your show and what you're doing made me think of that.
I appreciate that. Well, Deborah, thank you for joining us today. HipHarp.com. All that information will be in the show notes. So for those of you listening and you go, I didn't get it, go to the show notes. Worst case scenario, contact us at newclevelandradio@gmail.com, and I will put you in touch with Deborah and be the voice for all of us. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Karen. Thank you.
Have a great day. Bye-bye now.